Bitcoin is recovering, and I sold quite a bit of my Bitcoin on the 14th of March, one day after the all-time high. Was this a mistake? Should I be buying back in? Should you be buying back in? I'm sharing here the data that I'm looking at, the on-chain metrics that I believe are relevant. So we're not just going to draw random lines on price charts. We're not just going to express our gut feelings. We're going to work with hard data that most people aren't considering, that I believe time the market pretty well. Let's start off with the realized cap. So this is an on-chain metric that looks at whenever a Bitcoin moves, how long had that Bitcoin actually been held for, and at what price was it bought the last time. So when you're receiving your Bitcoin, say over here, and then afterwards you're sending it a few months later for a higher price, then you've got a lot of realized profit. Now, we don't necessarily know if you bought the Bitcoin at the time or if you just moved it to another wallet of yours. This is a limitation of this approach, but at least we know that there is some kind of activity happening at certain points in time. And we simply just think whenever there's a transfer, there's also a buy and a sell. And so this is a relatively long-term chart. It starts in the middle of 2013, where Bitcoin was just $100, goes all the way to today. So that's this black line. And in green and in red, we see the realized cap. So in other words, a lot of people took profit over here. A lot of people realized losses over here. And there seems to be a recurring pattern, right? Whenever, and this is measured in Bitcoin, not in dollars, whenever we hit an upper ceiling in realized profit, then at least short term, the rally can turn around. If we are unlucky, we can even enter an entire bear market, right? Where we drop then by 80%. However, when there is a lot of loss realization, then people are completely in despair, and we should be buying whenever people sell at a loss. Again, at least in aggregate. Right? So what does this tell us? First of all, we see that these tops, they tend to slightly go down, right? This realized profit over here was larger than this realized profit. The recent one was even lower than the one in 2021. The realized profit is approaching zero. It's not yet super depressed though. So there's no loss taking. It's still profit taking. And I believe this is a hyper important concept in any investment for that matter. People look at their entry price. People look at, I have allocated, say, 10% of my wealth into Bitcoin. And then they follow the Bitcoin price. And if the Bitcoin price goes up, say it doubles, right? Suddenly you've got 20% roughly, a bit less than that, in Bitcoin in your portfolio. And you might want to rebalance your portfolio. You might want to take some profit. Maybe you don't want to have 20% of your portfolio in Bitcoin because you started out with 10%. So when people are in aggregate in profit, they tend to take profit. They tend to potentially sell, and vice versa, right? When people realize losses because they don't want to see more losses, then they tend to stop selling at some point. So this is simply the human psychology of reference prices. That's why this is such a powerful tool. And currently we are pretty balanced. In other words, there is no real need to do anything extreme at this point in time in this market. It doesn't make sense to go completely risk on, to take out a personal loan and buy all the Bitcoin you can, but it also doesn't make sense to panic sell anything because we are not necessarily super elevated. We are simply just entering the calm waters again. We've got 4 similar charts like this coming up. If you so far enjoy this video, please give this a like. It helps the channel grow. Thank you. Let's have a look at the next chart. This is the market value to realized value Z-score. So the market value is simply just the current price times the Bitcoin that's in circulation, right? Just at what price did Bitcoin move the last time? The realized value is looking at all of the Bitcoin, right? At what price did all of the Bitcoin ever move? So what's the cost basis of the entire market? And Z-score simply says that we are looking at the current profit or losses of the entire market and put this in relation to the current volatility. So how much does Bitcoin on average go up and down on any given day? When it's going up and down a lot, then we can potentially expect more outliers to the top and to the bottom. If we are rather calm, then just a little bit above the realized price might already be a reason to sell, right? And so this is what that chart shows. The realized price is in purple. Sometimes we are above, sometimes we are below. We should be buying when we are below. So when the market in aggregate is in losses. And then we see a translation of that over here with the MVRV score. So we're looking at how much is the market in profit relative to the realized price. Is this by 1.5 standard deviations, etc.? And sometimes, let me clean that up. a little bit. Sometimes we might be turning around only after a 1.5 standard deviation above the realized price. Sometimes only 1 standard deviation is enough, as recently happened. Again, we are very close to the realized price. There is no extreme value here. So when there's nothing extreme, don't do anything extreme. At least I don't. I simply just follow my standard program. I simply just look at my target allocation that I want to have to crypto at a neutral point in time. I don't want to be under allocated, as in I want to have enough in case it goes up that I'm happy with the profits, but I also don't want to be over allocated, that in case we suddenly crash by 30, 40, maybe 50%, that I then suddenly have to panic sell. I rather want to be in the position where I can then buy the dip, right? I want to have other assets as well besides Bitcoin, let's say long-term government bonds, let's say stocks, that I could then potentially sell and then buy into a potential Bitcoin crash. Not saying that the Bitcoin crash will happen, just saying it's one of many possibilities. We are simply just neutral right now, at least according to those two metrics. Let's continue with more metrics. And before we do that, there's another little plug here. In case you're new here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. Here's the next chart. This is the binary coin days destroyed Z-score. So what are coin days destroyed? And what is a Z-score? Before I explain this, let's first look at the signals. We can see that sometimes this tends to alert a bit too early, right? It might say sell at $3,000 when actually we're still going up to the 20K. But then other times it does pretty perfect calls. And we should actually be selling here at 10K because afterwards we see the Corona crash and see another 50% drop. So it's not a perfect measure. It's simply just a signal to potentially rebalance again if at the point in time you are overexposed. And of course, we did see recently such a signal again. Now, what is this actually? What are coin days destroyed? Coin days destroyed looks at how long has a Bitcoin been held in the past. How many Bitcoin have not moved for a long period of time that then suddenly move? So let's say there's a wallet with 100 Bitcoin that haven't moved for 2 years. And suddenly after 2 years, those 100 Bitcoin move, then 200 years of coin days get destroyed. If it's only 1 Bitcoin that moves, say after 5 years of silence, then it's 5 coin years destroyed. So this metric looks at the size of a wallet and at its dormancy. And the larger a wallet is and the longer it's dormant, the more coin days can be destroyed. In other words, it's a metric to determine whether or not the rich diamond hands are currently selling. And if they do, then maybe it makes sense for us little plebs to sell as well. So the smart rich capital is selling whenever this is spiking up. Here is an adjusted version of this. This is the Bitcoin value days destroyed multiple. It tends to time the market slightly better. And this was, by the way, the reason why I sold 1 day after the Bitcoin top. The value days destroyed multiple peaked massively. The price peak was on the 14th of March. Another good metric to determine whether or not it makes sense to currently buy heavily or be somewhat neutral or to sell heavily is to check, is there currently a lot of despair in the market? And the people that tend to get most nervous are the short-term traders. Check out this. This is the Bitcoin short-term holder coin days NTV and RTV ratio. That's the network to transaction value relative to the realized value. And this tends to peak massively for the short-term holders whenever we are in despair, whenever we are at the absolute bottom of the market. And look how nicely this determined historically great buying opportunities. Whenever this is up, you want to get into Bitcoin with maximum leverage, with a personal loan, just to then afterwards capitalize greatly on the upside. The 20 to 16K had been a massive, nice buying opportunity, and I personally bought quite heavily at that time. Now we are very far away from this. I'm not saying the rally can't continue. It can continue for a while. Just because we are at 0.05 here, right, doesn't mean that we can't rally further. It happened massively in 2017. But it also means that this is not a historically great buying opportunity. In my books, I believe it simply makes sense to follow your regular strategy, whatever that is. If that's dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin, so buying a little bit every month, or if this is simply just staying on the sidelines, waiting for a better opportunity, whatever it is, simply just follow what has worked for you nicely over the last years. Again, if it's your first time here, feel free to like and feel free to subscribe. I publish videos regularly. And if you've got Telegram, feel free to join us. Link is down below. It's 100% free.